Hello and welcome to another edition of the ChinnyVision podcast. Great guest today, it's Rob Gigerpunk from Rob's Retro Rambles. Hi Rob.
Hello you.
Tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel first of all.
It's just me playing games at random. I'll just pick a game that I fancy and play it. And unlike yourself with all your fancy capture magic, I literally point a camera at a TV screen and talk while I'm playing.
But the thing is, it's like being in the room with you.
Yes, I do like channels where they do proper research and they'll tell you all that, but that's like attending a presentation. This is more sitting next to your mate, having a natter while you play games while you're waiting for your turn.
I tell you what it's exactly like. It's like going around my mate's house where he would play the games the entire time and I'd sit there just watching him because I wasn't going to get a chance on the computer playing his new games. It's exactly like that, but it's good, it's great, and it's a very different experience from a lot of YouTube channels. So where did you first come across computer gaming?
That would have been when, I'm assuming it must have been for Christmas, we got a grandstand multi-pong type thing with Kevin Keegan on the cover, so that dates it a bit. It must have been about 79, 80, I think. It had about 8 different versions of Pong. There was like hitting a block against a wall, hitting a block against a wall with 2 players, and then there was multiple different bat types, so you could pretend it was tennis or you could pretend it was football. And then the last 2 were light gun games because it came with a rifle that also converted into a pistol. And so that was the first. That must have been late 70s, early 80s. We got a grandstand machine, and then we got a Commodore 64 with 1 tape deck, 1 joystick, and 1 game, and the joystick broke and got taken back. And so we had that and a load of books on basic and programming and stuff that we never paid any attention to because we wanted to play the games. So yeah, that was about 83. Had a Commodore 64, and then that Commodore 64 lasted me until I went to uni in the mid to early 90s, and I still took it to uni with me, but then in my second year of uni I bought a 486, and yeah, then the C64 finally got packed away, but it lasted a good old while.
So this isn't one of these podcasts where you've got a very interesting computing history before the C64, but the co-host, for example, jumps on and goes, so when did you get your C64? Skipping over all of that stuff. It genuinely was your first computer and there wasn't much going on before then.
No, I was running around in fields, climbing trees, all that sort of stuff, and then suddenly, Commodore 64, forget all that.
Oh, trees, brown, Commodore 64, brown.
Yes,
I can't help myself. So
no one ever said anything about brown when we were kids. It was always the Commodore 64 was blocky and the Spectrum had colour clash. No one ever said anything about brown. That seems to be a very recent thing.
Mainly because my mate with the C64 only had a black and white set. So the first time I saw it in colour is he bought it around my house. So what games were you playing on it?
The first game that we had was Depth Charge. Dad brought home one day a game called Pulz 64, Pulz 64. I've covered it on the channel, and I've also managed to capture it because it wasn't up on any sites. I did get that captured. That should be out there on whatever ROM sets are out there. And it's basically snakes are coming down from the ceiling. You're at the bottom. You're shooting up towards them. Eventually, they will get you. So we had those 2 games, and then it was time for me to start buying games. So I bought Jet Set Willy and BMX Racers for £10 Christmas money one year.
And that's quite a big jump up, playing Jet Set Willy, being able to wander around all of those rooms.
Oh, yeah, because Depth Charge was literally just a single screen boat versus submarines jobby, and then Pulz was everything just on one screen, and then suddenly Jet Set Willy. Oh, I've heard so much good things from all my friends about that. I hadn't played it on any friends' machines. It's just everyone was talking about Jet Set Willy then. It's like, I'm having Jet Set Willy with my Christmas money. And yeah, suddenly being able to go all around these rooms all over the place. And to be fair, BMX Racers, even though it was rubbish, scrolling up the screen, music playing, that was quite something. And I think the next one I got then was Booty for £2.50, and that was another lots of screens to explore and lots of platforms and things. So slowly the world expanded like that. And but I distinctly remember Action Biker Clumsy Colin being a big favourite because I enjoyed that on Spectrum on Friends. Don't know why. Looking back at it now, no idea why I enjoyed it because it's a terrible game. But I bought it on the C64 and it's an entirely different game and it's isometric 3D and the ability to go behind objects was mind-blowing for me. It's like, oh my God, it's like a real 3D world. So that was quite something.
It is. It's a strange kind of, okay, you die in many different ways, but it's a strange kind of sandbox game with that display. It's a shame that it's not on the Spectrum. Well, it is on the Spectrum, but it's a different game.
Yeah.
And it's great on the C64 and the Atari, just being able to wander around this map. And again, if you hadn't seen something like that before, it would have been, remarkable.
I'm thinking it's like the way people rave about Ant Attack, and Ant Attack never grabbed me. I think I played Ant Attack a bit too late, but if I'd played Ant Attack first and a real 3D city to wander around, that probably would have grabbed me more. But instead, I had this strange 3D town that looped around on the edges and things, but you could ride around it on a bike. So obviously that's much cooler than Ant Attack, wasn't it? But yeah.
It's what you've got, really. There is this tendency in the community to gravitate towards certain games. And I'd never played Ant Attack until the 90s, for example. Never even seen it, didn't know what it was about.
I think it was the same for me, to be honest, looking back, doing a little bit of retro gaming in the 90s and going, oh, that, was it? All right, never mind.
It is. It's kind of almost like a group thing, which is good. What you try and do on your channel, show different, more obscure games. You mentioned there about your friends having different computers. So what did they have?
I had a friend with a VIC-20, and obviously first thing I did was, it's Commodore. Can I borrow one of your games, see if it loads? Obviously it didn't, but I had to try. So I ruled that out. So there was one friend with a VIC-20 and two friends with Spectrums. One of the Spectrum owners, when the C64C came out, he upgraded and got a Commodore 64C. And the VIC-20, the VIC-20 owner, he also got a Commodore C64C, the Hollywood pack, the one that came with Platoon and various others, and that was, that's really nice.
He must have been hanging on to that VIC-20 for a while.
Oh yeah, he had a lot of adventure games on cartridge, and he and his parents, they'd sit of an evening in the living room and work on adventure games on the VIC-20. Seemed very odd to me at the time when you could play shoot 'em ups and things like that, but it was a nice family pastime for them. But yeah, he then got that, and the other Spectrum owner I know, he kept going with that until he got a SNES, and then he got a Jaguar. So yeah, make of that what you will.
So as the years goes on, I say you're sticking with the C64.
Oh yeah.
Any peripherals coming in, different games?
Oh, well, that was one of the things. I did buy a disk drive for my 64 from a bigger boy in sixth form who who'd moved on to Amiga, and this bloke he must have been doing quite well because he had a modem. He was on CompuNet. He was doing lots of trading of things. He had boxes of games on disk. Basically, I bought his disk drive and all his disks, and I suddenly had 300 disks, half of which had games on, half of which had demos and all sorts of things from CompuNet, and it was just like, here's the internet in archive form, enjoy. and two little notebooks listing one page per disc saying what was on each disc, and I was just going through going, this is fun. And it came with Action Replay and Freeze Machine cartridges because different discs had been saved with different cartridges, so you needed the right cartridge for the right disc. Suddenly I had 300 discs with all sorts of games, including stuff like Catechis and things that had never been released. It's like, oh my word, what have I got here? So that was fun.
This kid's got a C64, a modem, a disc drive, an Action Replay, and lots of games on discs that you haven't said have boxes. He sounds like a Gonch Gardner from Grange Hill, if you will, character. I hesitate to use the word software pirate, but was that what was going on?
To be fair, there were a stack of legitimate discs as well. He did buy discs as well. It looks, going by the receipts, I think he sent off to US Gold and bought them directly and things like that. So I don't know how or why. A lot of my early disc games, legit ones, were bought with that disc drive as well. And there are a lot of legit ones, but yeah, there were 300 discs because he had a mate with it who also had a modem, and I think they swapped between themselves, so they download stuff and they also bought things. But yeah, it was a lot of pirated stuff. He was a bit dodgy, but yeah, he also had, as I guess maybe when you're paying that much on a phone bill, you can't afford to buy the games. So
I'm just thinking, as an Amstrad owner with a disc 6128 owner with a disc drive, you go into WH Smith's in our small town, and you would perhaps see one disc game on sale for the CPC. And that's how I got RoboCop. I didn't want RoboCop. I had money in my pocket. There was a disc game there. I thought, oh, it's been number one for 10 billion years, so it can't be that bad. And that's how I got it. But I don't recall, apart from specialist software shops, seeing C64 disc games around. So were you finding them in shops? Were they hard to get hold of?
Very, very lucky finds here and there. Generally, there was, because most of the time, Boots, Smiths, and all the other news agents, it was always cassettes, and that was it. But there was one computer shop in town that stocked all the major ones, and occasionally, very occasionally, you'd see a Commodore 64 game, and sometimes it was within price range, like Bubble Ghost. I think that cost me something like £3-4, but I had no idea about it. I think I remember the review being, it's all right. But it was like £3-4 for a disc game. I'm having it. I'm just having it. It's simple as that. It's a disc game. On the flip side of that, one day I was incredibly lucky. Like, I think the month before, I'd bought Turrican on cassette and had been blown away by it. And then a month or two later, suddenly at the local computer shop, Turrican was there for C64 on disc. So I bought it. So I bought it a second time so I could have it on disc.
You say you've been to chains. What were these local computer shops like that you were going to?
Oh, literally, as they say, mom and pop, sort of just some grumpy blokes behind the counter in a small little shop round a side alley in town, in Bridgend. And nothing much to speak of. I think they slowly moved to other places when PCs started taking over and they started doing we'll build you a 486 or whatever, that sort of thing. And then I think probably by the time Pentiums came around, they weren't around anymore. I don't know what happened to them because I disappeared off to uni. When I came back, they weren't around.
A lot of these shops were quite short-lived, and including the infamous one in my town, which the local kids nicknamed Hitler Games.
Yes.
Because the owner looked like Hitler, and it lasted precisely 1 year, the length of his lease.
Oh, blimey.
So the C64, you really are, as you mentioned, sticking with it. So what was it like as an Amstrad owner who also stuck on pretty much to the bitter end? What was it like as the things were declining, and were you still able to get hold of games easily, or were you tempted to go elsewhere?
My bedroom had 3 large drawers, supposedly for my clothes, and then it's like a long desk, 3 large drawers on one side, 3 small drawers on the other side for your socks and pants and that sort of thing. And basically, I just put all my clothes into the small drawers and slowly filled up the large drawers with games. Just all the discs and all the cassettes just filled these drawers. And so I wasn't short of games, and I wasn't bothered about, friends got like SNES and Mega Drives, things like that. There was a Mega Drive at the local video shop that you could rent out if you left a deposit. But fortunately, my friend's mum worked there, so she was like, "Don't worry about the deposit. You can just rent it for the rental price." So we'd rent a Mega Drive, and we'd get John Madden and Alien Storm, and I can't remember what else. Oh, probably Road Rash. But this was before Sonic came out, so my knowledge of the Mega Drive stops before Sonic. We just play a few of those early games, and it was like, could I get a console? It was like my parents were very much, that's hundreds of pounds, and the games cost how much each? No, you're not having that. That's ridiculous money. And you've got the computer there. What are you going to do? And I was fine with that. I was happy with the games that I had. I could go around to friends' houses and play on their fancy consoles if they wanted, and I had the biggest collection of games for the Commodore 64 probably in the entire school. And as they upgraded, like if they got an Amiga or if they got a console, they were keen to sell off their old computers. So I generally bought their old computer as a spare and all their entire collection of games for like £20 or something like that. Suddenly my collection was even bigger, and it meant that they could still play their old games when they came around to my house. So that worked out quite nicely for me. I slowly amalgamated all my friends' computers into my own collection.
It's essentially how I started collecting without knowing about it. Picking up 91-ish, 92 Spectrum Plus and another Spectrum Plus, and put them together and made them work because both of them were broken, off of friends and their games, which I still have those games. And you're not aware, but you've suddenly become a collector.
Yes, and unfortunate. I've just remembered now, one of the ones that I got saying about getting Commodore 64s, I got a toast rack. I was a toast rack owner, second hand, But somewhere there is a toast rack with a power supply on it with the 9-inch nails logo painted onto it, because I was bored one day and decided to paint 9-inch nails onto the power supply. So if you ever see a power supply for a toast rack with the NIN logo on it, that was mine, because I don't know what happened to it. I thought it was up in my parents' loft. And when I went up there to get my Commodore 64 down and have a rummage around, I found all sorts of other bits, boxes of Lego, all sorts of things. Can't find that toast rack. There's a box somewhere with a toast rack and my Commodore 64 paddle controllers, and I don't know what else. I just know that toast rack is missing somewhere, which is annoying, because I think I paid probably £50 for it, with a cassette deck and all this guy's games as well. And they're a bit more than that now.
So, I mean, this is where the collecting begins.
Yes.
So tell us about how it expanded.
Well, that's the thing. I went to uni and I took it with me and enjoyed playing that. But then it was like other friends, they'd got 486s or Macs, and it was like, yeah, I'm doing a computing course. I do kind of need to have my own computer at home. So savings and parents helping, and I got a 486 DX266, and I had a choice of, do I want 8 meg of RAM or do I want a CD drive and sound card? And I saw Doom in the shop running on that equivalent machine, and one with a CD drive and sound card and one with 8 meg of RAM, and I saw no difference between between the amounts of RAM, but I did see a difference in having sound. Suddenly stereo sound was, oh my word, yeah, I'm having the sound card. So it took me a while to upgrade to be able to get anything more that required more than 4 meg of RAM. But that was Doom, that was Day of the Tentacle, all sorts. I was just playing PC games non-stop then for the next 10 years probably, and the 64 got put away into the loft. So
presumably, though, you're running emulators and things on the PC, because this was the boom time when all this stuff came out.
I dabbled a bit. I remember first seeing some Spectrum emulators and going, oh, that's got, but didn't have much joy with Commodore 64 ones to start with. I'm not sure what, and it felt emulated. It didn't feel like the same thing.
Oh yeah,
it was. It was like, oh yeah, it's good. You can run that now. Now I can play. But there was, at the time, it still felt like it's a novelty. Oh look, you can do that. But it's like, well, I could do the real thing if I wanted to do that. But yeah, it's kind of cool that I can do this. But the PC, I'll play PC games. I'll play Carmageddon and all this other stuff. If I want to play C64, I'll play on the 64.
But you've got this massive collection now of machines. For example, an Amstrad CPC 464, your favourite machine, and all these other bits of kit you've got. So how did that begin? Because I'm guessing it didn't begin. I was assuming, like me, it had begun when you were at school obtaining all these bits of kit, but it sounds like it actually started after the PC era.
Pretty much. Well, around about, let's see, it was about 98, 99, I met my now late wife, Jules, and she had a Mega Drive. And so we then had a Mega Drive and various other things, and an N64 and Master System, and I think I picked up a SNES cheap somewhere just at random. Oh, and around about 2000 as well, in a junk shop, I picked up a Vectrex for £12 with an extra cartridge of Scramble in it, because I just saw it in the junk shop. Went, oh my god, that's a Vectrex. I wonder if they know what they've got there. And obviously they didn't. Well, yeah, mate, how much do you want for this? 12 quid. Yeah, all right then. Walked out the shop, trying not to giggle insanely, just shaking as I got it out there, and it still worked. It's like, oh my god, that's probably the best bargain I've ever had. But it was just these occasional, oh, that's cheap, car boot finds and that sort of thing, just picking up the odd bits and pieces. And then sort of like PS3 came around, and I'd picked one up fairly cheap, and I started trying to play Battlefield with the boss, and it was like, it's like playing golf with the boss. It just wasn't fun. And I just couldn't get into it, and the PS3 kind of ruined me for games. I got so bored with all the just samey stuff that was coming out, all the same sort of. You joke about Commodore 64 being brown. There were so many brown shooters, and it was also very much like I don't know if you ever went to UK Resistance, Gary Cutlock's website. Very much blue skies in games. All these modern games are all rubbish. We want to go back to running fast with red sneakers on and blue skies in games when things were happy. And it's like, yeah, although I was never really into Sonic, I can grok that. I felt a calling there that older games are more my thing, and I've got so fed up with modern gaming that I got a because my Xbox was chipped. I had an emulator. I had emulators on that. I'd been watching people like Steve Benway playing games badly just so you can see what they look like. You don't have to be an expert, and you don't have to do. You can sit and play a game. And go, oh, I remember this game. And so that's where my channel then came from. I just started doing emulated C64 stuff on Xbox, and things slowly spiraled from there as I slowly picked up more machines and started doing it with real hardware and started taking over a corner of the bedroom, and then eventually took over an entire bedroom with the amount of stuff that I've got. And it's just all gone a bit mad from there, really.
It does grow. I'm sitting in my work office looking at a GX 4000 on the top of the filing cabinet, and Amstrad JY2 behind the mixing desk. And I think, yes, it's this stuff can get out of hand. What's the pride of your collection?
Well, I think it's still going to have to be the Vectrex, because there's nothing else. There's nothing else like it. I do love my Commodore 128 that I picked up a few years ago. That's a very nice daily drive, I find. And I do finally have a full Mega Drive Tower of Power with Mark I CD unit and the 32X that me and my mates all laughed at back in the day. Yeah, it gets to be an itch that you need to scratch, whether you can actually play in the games that how many games of the 32X have I played? 3 or 4 so far, but they're there. They're all there so that I can play them when I want to, and they're all wired up and ready to go. That was the other thing I wanted. I didn't want to have stuff on shelves. I wanted consoles that you go, what do you fancy? Do you want SNES? Do you want NES? Do you want Saturn? Do you want this? And just switch them on, and the TV is all wired up. That was a nightmare to get all hooked up, and it's an absolute mess, because you know what cables are like for just retangling themselves, and you move one thing and suddenly everything else breaks. But most of the stuff is live and ready to go, with the exception of the computers, because there's only so many power supplies you can have plugged in at one time.
It's the setup you've got. It's if I didn't have a YouTube channel, it would be quite different, I suspect. I wouldn't have things like the ST. I wouldn't have an ST at all.
Yeah.
To be honest, there's things I have to get out for the channel, like the Archimedes, that I'd much rather have out for me. But there's a kind of feeling of this monster that you've got, that you're riding, that almost like dictates what you're doing. Do you find that?
Yeah, a bit. Like you say with the ST, I've got an ST, and I couldn't even touch. Is it a 520 some STFM? Maybe, I can't remember, because I only knew one kid in school with an ST, and he wasn't a friend of mine, and he was just like friend of a friend of a friend. It's like, oh, he's got an ST, is he? Oh, that's interesting. I've never got to play it, so I've got no. If I want to play something like that, well, I've got an Amiga 1200. I'd use that instead, wouldn't I? So there's probably ST owners going at that now, but it's just like you said, it's
early Amiga games.
Yeah,
that's where your ST comes in. When they didn't the early stuff where they did it originally on the Atari, and all people are going to hate me, but I say this stuff on the channel, and it's true. Because
everyone complained about
stuff.
Lazy ST ports, and that was that. So
yeah.
But yeah, I've got some systems that I've picked up dirt cheap just because maybe I'll do. I've got 2 TI-99s. I've never seen a TI-99. One day I'll get around to playing them and covering them on the channel, just because other people might like to see a TI-99. But I've got no, love of it. So,
I mean, I love the Dreamcast, but it doesn't fly on ChinnyVision. It just doesn't, and there's no point trying to fight that. I would sit down and play Wet Tricks all day long, for example. But I just, because I'm capturing, I just don't get the time. It's sitting there, but I just don't get the time to do it. And as you say, it's trying to select what you're going to cover. I try and batch capture. I try and do 2 or 3 games on the system at once to save swapping stuff around too much. But you sit there, and I go on somewhere like CPC Power and say, right, okay, what publisher haven't I covered recently? Go down the list, trying to pick games. You've got to make sure you've got it for all the systems, and it can become a chore, which is, again, why I like yours, because if you're just sitting down and playing one system on C64, it's just nice and easy. And those little 2 or 1 system game reviews I do, it's like, it's nice and easy. It's not all the hassle of, oh wait, do I have a crack for that that's going to let me get through that version quicker because I can't play these games for 2 hours each and all
Yeah.
that.
Whereas if I've got something and I've accidentally turned on Infinite Lives, and like I'm then stuck playing it because I go, well, I guess we're in for this one till the end, then, aren't we? Or like when I foolishly tried to play Sensible Soccer and accidentally stuck it onto, what was it? Some kind of league mode where it just kept giving me match after match after match after match, and I was just like, please make it end, please.
What are you looking to get for your collection next?
I'm still looking for a toast rack, and I've got a lead. There's a shop. I don't want to say exactly who, but they've said that they've got one that they're working on, and the guy who fixes these things thought he had it fixed, but he's not sure, and so they're going to get back to me when it's fixed and let me know, and they're not going to let it go to anyone else in the meantime. So it's like, oh, okay, so I'll hold out hope for a toast rack at some point there. But I've got a 30-odd-year-old cassette that Dad brought home from work that I've never been able to play, and they're all Commodore PET games. So I would love to get a Commodore PET just to play that cassette. But unfortunately, I missed my chance to find one cheap at a car boot sale 30 years ago, didn't I? So they're silly money now. And, of course, Rod Hull has stopped doing his mini PET now.
Oh.
If he still had those, I might consider saving up for one of those, but sadly,
that's the future as 8-bit who was doing those kits. I mean, yes, there was a point in the 90s where you were fawning over pets. They were all over school, just sitting there doing nothing. They were the first computers the school ever had, and they would just be sitting in the RE room.
Yeah.
Had a pet at the back. I don't think it was used for anything. The science room had a pet. Don't think it had been turned on in 10 years. We had a strange school because they went from pets to BBCs to Amstrad CPCs to Opus PCs, 486s.
Yeah.
So were they no, 286s. What am I saying? They were 286s. But yeah, they got through computers pretty quickly. But yeah, you were falling over them.
Yeah.
And then now they are absolutely absurd money.
I remember seeing in the storeroom of the physics lab a whole stack of TRS-80s. And this was in Cobb. I was like, oh my God, that's a TRS. I've heard of these. Sir, can I have one of these? No. And then never saw them again. I don't know what happened. I was like, oh well, that was the closest I ever got to a TRS-80. But on the flip side, a friend who works for local school, one of the local schools was being bulldozed and rebuilt as a brand new site elsewhere. So they were clearing out a whole load of stuff. He brought me an Archimedes and an Acorn RISC PC 720. And so I've got those, but obviously you know what it's like with an Archimedes. If they haven't, fortunately, mine's working. It didn't have it still had the battery in, but I got that out sharpish. And there was a battery in the RISC PC, and that wasn't damaged. But you know what these things are like. It's like finding a Morgan barn find. It's this old, weird, expensive machine, and you try and find parts. You try and find a keyboard for an Archimedes, and you go, oh, someone will go, oh, you've got an Archimedes, you've got money then, pay up.
And I see on YouTube that you're building an arcade machine.
Yes. A local friend, Game Whisperer, pointed out to me. He said he keeps an eye on a lot more of the local gum tree and that sort of thing, and someone was giving one away free, and it was even been dismantled and was sitting flat packed in the boot of their car. They'd taken the monitor for a spare for one of their own, but they had a TV that would fit, and they said that'll work in it. So like, do I want an arcade machine? Yes, of course I want an arcade machine. Do I want a huge Golden Tee arcade machine? It's like, well, might as well go big or go home. So yeah, I got a flat-packed Golden Tee arcade machine with a nightmare of a loom inside it, and I've basically gutted it because if it had been a classic arcade machine, I would have gone, oh no, that needs to be restored. Golden Tee, no one cares about those, do they? Yeah, I've basically got new loom and sweated and lost blood to this machine, getting the TV fitted inside and slowly fitting it up and trying to see, because I've got a few jammer boards that I picked up cheap years ago just on the off chance, and they work. So I was like, well, I can put those in, and then I can have this huge thing sitting in the middle, in the corner of the living room that I can play 2 games on. So I'm looking into a Pi solution. So maybe at some point, maybe I'll be doing arcade games rather than MAME. It'll be actually point a camera at an arcade machine as I play it.
What are the plans for the channel?
I might have exhausted all the games that I've got happy memories of. So I think it's more going to be me playing a random game for the first time and seeing what it's like.
You'll be on Rick the Roadie in no time. And whereabouts can people find you?
Well, I would say Twitter. That would normally be my normal place, but who knows where Twitter's going these days. And
in terms of YouTube.
Around. But YouTube, it's at Rob's Retro Rambles. Or is it Gigerpunk? One or the other. If you search for Rob's Retro Rambles or Gigerpunk on YouTube, you'll find me.
Thanks for joining me today.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.